Hello, and welcome to my lightning talk. Avoid unconscious bias to become a better colleague. I'm Misty Decker, mainframe modernization evangelist and product marketing director at Microfocus. We have 10 minutes to discuss a very complex topic, so let's dive right in. First, full disclosure, I'm not an expert on unconscious bias, but I do have 30 years of experience in a male-dominated industry and a passion for helping people combined with a habit of over-researching things. So what I will share today is a mix of what I've learned in my obsessive reading and my personal thoughts on the topic. First, let's start with a riddle. A father and his son were in a terrible car crash. The father died, but the little boy was rushed to the hospital. Once in the operating room, the doctor came in and immediately said, "I can't operate on this boy. He's my son." How is that possible? In the many years I have used this riddle to explain unconscious bias, I've only met a handful of people who knew the answer right away, and most of those were because they had heard it before. The reactions have been interesting. This riddle is what first alerted me to my own unconscious bias. I wasn't able to solve it when I first heard it either. One young woman, passionate and active in the women's movement, could not get over how she guessed two fathers before coming to the, statistically more likely case of the doctor being the mother. One gentleman spent an hour afterwards trying to convince me he couldn't be biased because he has a female doctor. But yet, even he still couldn't solve the riddle. Research says that 90% of your decisions are made unconsciously. Your brain can process only about 40 pieces of information out of the 11 million received every second. Making assumptions are literally a matter of survival. You couldn't function if you had to analyze and actively decide every little thing every second. But those assumptions are built based on images of what's familiar. Recently, Twitter found their image algorithm was biased. There's no emotion there. There's no decision to be biased. It was simply trained on the existing data set, just like your brain. Your brain has been trained on biased data. Since there are already existing disparities in society, those biases have become a part of your brain. I'm very sorry about that, but it's true. And it's important to understand that fact before you can take action to counter the effect. I want to point out that everyone has unconscious bias. It doesn't make you a bad person. The only bad thing you can do is persist in those biases once you realize they exist. The best thing to do is to actively try to discover and counteract them. How do these unconscious biases, even from well-meaning people, materially impact others? Here are just a few examples. An assumption that programmers have no life can lead managers to assuming they can work nights and weekends. And research has found that tall people, especially tall men, are much more likely to be seen as leaders. And this has led to a large proportion of executives being taller than average. There's one experiment that has always stood out to me. They showed people a series of videos with the exact same script. When the white males stood firm and said, "No, we won't do that," he was perceived as being strong and showing good leadership. But when the white woman said the exact same thing, she was perceived as being emotional and whiny. And when the black man said the line, he was perceived as being angry and threatening. In the workplace, that difference of perception could mean the white man is promoted, the woman is counseled, and the black man marginalized and possibly even fired for the exact same behavior. There's real danger in assuming you don't have biases. Have you ever heard someone say, "I'm not the problem, other people are just too sensitive"? Or, "I'm a woman, there is bias against me, but I can't be biased"? These phrases are sure signs that they haven't really looked at themselves closely yet. On the other hand, you might be well-meaning and overcorrect because of fear. What if they see me as biased? What if I'm accused of bias and it ruins my career and my reputation? Working with me as a woman, or even just paying me a compliment, might be a minefield for you. But this fear and strong desire to do the right thing can also lead to bad outcomes. You might start avoiding the woman or people of color in your organization, which prevents them from contributing fully. Or you might avoid getting to know your colleagues personally for fear of saying something that will upset them. So, yes, there are real problems, and they start from how our brains fundamentally work. But when there's awareness, that's the beginning of a solution. We can do this. We have to try. There are a few of my favorite actions you can take. The first step to kicking any bad habit is to recognize it. When you pay attention to when you start biting your nails, that's when you can find the pattern and kick the habit. Similarly, pay attention to when you might be biased. Ask yourself, would I respond differently if this was coming from someone else? Listen to marginalized groups. Listen to everyone. Their perception is their reality. So even if you don't agree with them, you still need to work to make them comfortable. Number 2, believe them. Many of the stories of unconscious bias I hear are things like mansplaining or correcting people on topics they know more about than you. If your first instinct is to doubt the expertise of others, that's a sign you might be suffering from unconscious bias. If the topic is their personal experience, then they are automatically the expert. As a white woman, it would be presumptuous of me to tell a Black person what it's like to be Black in America. I may have read a lot on the topic, but they are living it. Number 3, ask questions. Most people are happy to answer questions. Just be sure you ask respectfully. Why are you so sensitive about your hair? Okay, that's not a good way to learn about Black women's hair. Try, excuse me, would you be willing to explain some things to me about Black women's hair? Now, remember, some people don't want to represent their entire diversity group, and they really don't want to answer your questions. People are individuals, not their marketing segment. So you might want to try some simple questions just to open the conversation. I'd like to learn more about the biases you encounter, or simply, how can I help you? Number 4, respect their boundaries. Remember that everyone has different boundaries and preferences. When someone says they don't like hugging, you don't hug them, right? Similarly, if a woman says she doesn't feel included when you call the group you guys, accept her preferences. Don't start arguing, but I mean everyone when I say guys. It doesn't matter what you meant. What matters is that she feels included. Make a note of each person's preferences and honor that. This goes for preferences with pronouns or even who likes to have their video turned on for Zoom calls. Everyone has a right to be treated how they want to be treated. It's not about you and what you think they should feel. Your job is to make them feel welcomed and comfortable. Number 5, speak up. Assumptions and bias will continue until we educate everyone on what is and isn't real. It's up to all of us to speak up when we see bias in action. But remember to take into account the situation and the people involved. For me personally, I'd appreciate you calling out a bro in the bar, but I'd rather you not come to my aid too quickly in a business meeting. Your help in that setting could deepen unconscious bias by leaving the impression I was too weak to defend myself and I needed saving. But, more than just speaking up um, for others, make it safe for other people to voice their feelings. And finally, speak up for yourself. Let other people know what your preferences are and how you want to be treated. You have a right to be treated however you prefer. Number 6 is more involved and takes explicit action. Increasing diversity in reality is the best way to reduce unconscious bias. Then diversity becomes the normal that your brain is most comfortable with. Remember that your own unconscious bias makes it hard for you to increase diversity on your team, despite your best efforts. So you have to take active effort and constant reevaluation to ensure you are fairly bringing in the best and most diverse candidates into your team. If you need someone to present at a conference with you, you might make an effort to search first for a qualified person of color or a woman, or make your quick list a pick of people you think could do the job, but then evaluate that list. How many diverse people are on it? Challenge yourself to add a few underrepresented people. Number 7 is about training your brain. You've already learned that unconscious bias is naturally occurring in your brain, but it's based on the data set it's exposed to. Just as you work your muscles by lifting weights a little bit every day, you can train your brain by actively exposing yourself to diversity. So, as a man, go to those tech events for women. As a white person, join an organization empowering people of color. Try even as simple as watching television networks that target diversity groups like the WE channel or the BET. And read and study about these issues. Or even just make an explicit effort to talk to people who aren't like you. It's this concept of training your brain that is behind our new Women of COBOL series on Tech Channel. Every episode will be on a different COBOL topic related to the feature, featuring female speakers and eventually some of our male allies. You'll be learning about the issues around COBOL, but you'll simultaneously be training your brain to see women as technical experts and leaders. So this concludes our very quick overview of unconscious bias. I hope you've come away with an awareness of some of your own biases and ways you can grow beyond them. It's been constant work for me personally to counter my own biases, but it's well worth it, and I hope you come to the same conclusion.